All right, another walk down memory lane for one of the greatest teams in Bears history, the '63 champions. First championship since 1946. They won 4 of their last 5 games, including a 3-0 regular season finale against the Lions. And then from what we heard, gentlemen, many of you guys said it was one of the toughest games ever played, that game against the Detroit Lions. Thanks for being here. And Tom and I was telling Johnny, you can see the 1963 game in its entirety on YouTube. And to take the time to watch those guys play back then was a treat. We'll start with Mike because, like we said last night, your play as a tight end is probably the most underrated aspect of your football career, in my opinion. And being on that championship team and you coming there a couple of years earlier, it changed the face of the offense, didn't it?
Well, I don't, we had a block. We were tight ends and we blocked. They don't block anymore. They receive, but we blocked. And we blocked a lot. And we had great running backs. I had Willie Gallimore. We had great backs. We had a quarterback that liked to throw the football, Bill Wade. So he threw the ball to Johnny. Every once in a while, he'd throw it to me, once in a while, but not very much. He threw it to Johnny all the time because Johnny was faster, and he got open more than I did.
Yeah, come on. You tore it up.
No, I didn't.
You tore it up. Did he not tear it up?
But, hey, Coach, I saw highlights of you. I saw highlights of Coach Ditka where you're lined up almost by a wide, 6-7 yards off of your offensive tackle. So you weren't always right there with your nose in the dirt.
Hey, I was a tight end. That's all I know.
Actually, Mike and probably John Mackey, if you remember him with Baltimore, before the 60s, your tight end was usually tall guy, catch the look pass 6-8 yards for the first down. Mike, who had decent speed, he had good speed, especially when he was younger, and he changed the game. He and John Mackey changed the game. They became threats downfield, and that's what changed the game. And the other thing that changed the game was putting the smaller guys out as wide receivers. Usually the smaller guys were running backs, and they put them out as wide receivers. Changed the game.
John trying to tell you, I was really fast. I was a real fast tight end. I outran everybody.
Hey, when we look at that game, Bob, how were the field conditions? Like, did your spikes get into the ground? Did you have a choice of shoes to wear? The field conditions, they had hay on the field, and then they tried to heat, and then took all the hay off the field before you played, obviously.
That was for the championship game. They put hay on the field, and they put huge tarps across the field and huge blowers. And so for about 2 weeks before the game, they put these blowers and blew the tarps high. So when we took the field on the championship game, the turf was in good shape.
It was hard as this, though, huh?
No, it got hard the second half.
Yeah.
It was still pretty good the first half. But
in the narration of the game, they referred to the Wrigley Field as a modern-day structure. Did it feel that way to you guys, or did it?
Not really, especially if you saw the locker rooms. The facilities weren't the best, but it was what we had to live with. I just want to say one thing. You're talking about Mike Ditka and the tight end. We played the Pittsburgh Steelers the Sunday after the assassination of Ted Kennedy, or President Kennedy, John Kennedy. And it was a tough game, and we were losing, and Mike Ditka caught a short pass, and everybody on the Pittsburgh Steelers had a shot at this guy.
Here it is, Bob.
He ran over about 3 or 4 people.
3 or 4 is more than that.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And that catch and run, that catch and run enabled us to kick a field goal that tied the game, and that's why we ended up in the championship.
That's right.
You were tuckered out.
Not too much speed.
Well, no, you were tired.
The breakaway speed came later in life. I didn't have it then.
But when you see that run, set the dynamics of that, because you admitted you were out of gas. A different play was called, and you said, "Hey, give me a short pass," and
Well,
bam.
Yeah, I can tell exactly. I don't know if you remember, John, but Bill asked me. He said, "What can you run?" I said, "No, I can't run." He said, "Throw me a short pass, and I'll try to run with it." And he threw me a look in, and I ran with it. I'm serious. I was dead. That's the first time that I'd been back to Pittsburgh, and I played in front of the people. That's where I went to school and everything. So my family, everybody's there. I mean, I was so hyped up for the game. And the Steelers were a good football team. They were a good football. They had a good defense. But I got lucky. They didn't have tackling practice that week. Everybody missed me.
But the reality of it, and we have a graphic of this as well, with the assassination, how difficult was it to play, guys? How hard was it to play that game for you?
Well, we really didn't know that we were going to play the game until Saturday morning when we came to practice. We were coming off the practice field on Friday, and the clubhouse guy, Bill Martell, said the president's been shot. And so after everybody showered, they still didn't know if the game was going to be played or not. So Halas said, you pack your bags as if we're going to be going on the trip. And we never really knew that we were going until we came to practice on Saturday morning. And going there, it was just very quiet. The stadium was dead silence. There was no public address. There was no bands. There was no noise. There was nothing. It was just eerie as heck,
You share the same memory of that, Johnny?
Yes, nobody really wanted to play, but we just, it was decided that we were going to play, and the decision was made, and so we did it. And I'll never forget that whole weekend. The United States of America was really affected by that.
Bob, you're also quoted on the way to the stadium. Lee Harvey Oswald, you heard, was shot, and I read this, that Mr. Halas smashed the radio.
Right.
Explain what happened.
Well, we were driving over to from the hotel to the stadium, and somebody had the radio on in the luggage rack, and they were talking about the transfer of Lee Harvey Oswald from one prison to the next, and so we were listening to this intently all the way from the hotel to the field, and just before we got to the field, just as the bus was stopping, the guy was announcing how Harvey Oswald was being transferred and everything, and all of a sudden he said, "He's been shot, he's been shot," And with that, Halas jumps up and he says, "We got a game to play." Shut that blank radio off, bango, it was over,
Crazy time.
Yeah. Every time I see Bob, you got to remember, football was a little different. Back in most of our playing days, the quarterback called the plays. Now, maybe from the sidelines they would send in a player with the play, but the quarterback called the plays. And of course, they ran a lot more back in those days than they passed. And I'd be right next to Bob in the huddle, and Ditka was close by. And with the quarterback calling the plays, you could say, "Hey, let's do this." We could talk in the huddle. And sometimes I'd say, let's do this, call this, and Bob would say, "Hell no, we're going to run the ball. We got to get 3 yards." So it was more fun in the huddle than nowadays. The play comes into the quarterback, right? And that's the play that the coach has called, and so nobody says anything. I don't think they say that much in the huddle like we used to. We used to have fun in the huddle, right?
Did you have fun in the huddle? He said you guys had fun in the huddle. Was it fun?
I didn't pay much attention in the huddle.
Johnny, did you come out of a three-point stance as a wide receiver back then?
No.
Because I thought I saw some highlights of you extended out there, and it seemed like that was a transition in the NFL, that wide receivers made from a three-point stance into a two-point stance. But you were also a great track man.
Well, I think when it first, back, the wide receiver was called a flanker in those days. A flanker is the same thing as a wide receiver. And I had been a running back for so I was kind of used to going in a three-point stance. But once I was there for a few, for a training camp of one season, I said, no, you got to stand up. And the thing is, you can get a much quicker start. When you stand up, to start running, you have to kind of put your feet back, and you don't get off as quickly. It's kind of hard to explain.
But did your track background help you in those terms of getting off the ball quicker?
Yeah, it helped you, especially as a running back. Yes. As a wide receiver, I still think that if you're up and you can survey the field better, certain things, it's just better to stand up as a wide receiver. It's more effective in the long run.
Did you know that Johnny held the world record for the 40-yard indoor dash?
50, informal record, yeah.
I mean, it is interesting because, not a lot of time to speak translated into being a good football player. And when I look at some of the numbers you had a great year in '64 too. So who fed who? Did you feed passes for Ditka, or did Ditka feed passes for you?
Well, I think it's back and forth. Both of us did the same for each other. But the thing was, Mike and I were usually on the same side of the field. I was strong side, so it was hard for the teams to double both of us. When you have a strong tight end with the wide receiver, it was hard to double. You can only double one guy. You can't double both guys. So that was one of the strengths we had in our team.
There's a quote from Rick Caceres that always rings with me. He said, if you were a Bear, you were a king in Chicago. Did you feel that way back in 1963?
I guess it depends on what bars you hung out in. No, it was great. It really was. We used to go to a place called the Cottage. That's what I really remember. Freddie Hattenberg had a place down there. All the Cubs used to go there, and a Bear player right down on Clark Street, on North Clark Street. And on a Sunday night, the place would be packed. Everybody would come to see the Bear players.
Mike Ditka, I remember watching films. He is the only guy that I can remember that I saw on many occasions throw a block, cut a guy down, and immediately roll over and get the next guy. Because usually when you have a block to make and you make your block, you look up and, hey, I did my job. He had that natural instinct to go for the second block. And how many times do you see a guy make a second block in one play, right, Bob?
I used to see you block, Johnny. That's why we called you sneaky, because he would go down the field and there'd be pass caught by somebody else, and he would sneak up behind the defensive back and get down on all fours, so when the guy turned around, he'd fall over Johnny.
Bob, what was the Bears' signature play of that year for offensive line, or what type of running play was your signature play?
Running play? Probably the quarterback sneak. I think we scored more touchdowns with the quarterback sneak.
I saw you running in that game a few times.
Bill Wade, didn't he score both touchdowns on quarterback sneaks after throwing to Mike for a couple of key plays?
We had a sweep, we had a knob tackle play, and we had the fullback right up the middle. I don't remember a hell of a lot of plays that we had. It wasn't too complicated. Yeah. I know we had one where the tackle and the tight end, I blocked down, the tackle came out, we kicked out.
49
switch,
toss
I
test.
think. I don't know. But it was interesting.
All right, tell us about that defense, gentlemen, because 10 points a game it allowed. That's it in 1963. How great was the 63 defense?
I can't win in this. I think it was the best. I really do.
I think it was the best.
Well, you only give up 10 points. Hello. Those guys were trying to score. Our defense was unbelievable. People don't remember how Joe Fortunato and Bill George and those guys, they were good. They were really good. J.C. Carolina, I can go on and on. Rosie Taylor, they were good football players. They were really good. They didn't get the acclaim that they would get today, no.
We have Bill George, Doug Atkins. Mike, you're a really good judge. You played on that team, and you also coached the Super Bowl team. Could you compare the Bears' 63 defense to the 85 defense?
Well, you know, that would be unfair to both, but I'm just glad I was a part of the 63 thing because those guys are good. I mean, Richie Pettibone, I mean, he was bigger than me, and he played safety.
He's 6'4".
Yeah, I mean, he's bigger than me, and he weighed more, too. And then we had...
Benny McRae was as fast as a cat.
Who was a little pain in the ass cornerback?
Benny McRae?
Who?
Or Dave Witzel?
Witzel, yeah.
Dave Witzel.
Yeah, he was good.
How are the we are fortunate to practice against the 85 defense, and we practice live most times. What was the tempo of practice back against the team of the 63 defense?
Well, we never really had difficult practices, to be honest with you. It was just more or less walk-through plays and all that stuff. Once the season started, we really didn't hit.
That's interesting.
Yeah, Coach, I thought George Halas raised you as a coach. You're killing us in practice, and when you were going through walkthroughs?
No, this was for us, yeah.
That didn't hurt him. Look at him. That is funny. I never realized that you guys didn't.
You know, going back to the 63 defense, there's no question that they were excellent, and the offense really wasn't that potent. So whenever they'd get the ball, and we'd go on the field, Ed Obadovich used to tell us, "Okay, guys, hold them."
You know, Doug Atkins, they didn't count sacks in those days. Doug Atkins, I bet if they went back and looked at his 13-year career and checked, I wonder how he would rate on sacks, because it seemed like he had three or four sacks a game to me.
Well, he said once that he thinks he would have had 25 sacks in 1 year. So it is a shame that they didn't keep that statistic. By the way, that team picture that was put up, 26 players and coaches on that team photo right there. Again, coaches included, and former Bears players that became coaches were ranked in Don Pearson and Dan Pompei's top 100 list. So that's quite a testament to the quality on that team, gentlemen, including
Either
all
that
three
or they
of
were
you guys.
poor judges, one of the two.
No, not at all.
I'll tell you what, of all the things on that team, I remember one thing. We had the best damn punter I've ever seen in Bobby Joe Green. He could punt the football. I mean, really, unbelievable. And I was a punter in college, so I come out, and Halas had me out there punting. I'm standing next to this guy punting. I'm going, hey, I can't punt with this guy. He was unbelievable. He was, you know, people don't think about the punter. A big part of that team. Changed field position for us a lot of time by just the way he punted the ball.
What his big strong suit was, it was the hang time of his punts.
Oh, yeah.
He'd be over 40 yards, but it'd be so high
Right.
that the team would be able to get down there for the defense before the ball would.
He's the second best punter I can ever remember in the NFL, next to the
Ray Guy.
Ray Guy, yeah.
You know, when Mr. Buckus was on before, he said that Doug Atkins never worked out. And if he would have worked out, he would have been the Superman of the NFL. Were any of you guys introduced to weights at that time, or any type of fitness, or when was your introduction to fitness and weights?
Well, actually, it came after the '63 season. I think in '63, when Clyde Emmerich joined the team, we were doing isometric exercises.
Yeah, the one guy that did it was Stan Jones. I remember him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he did work out, and he had a weight program and everything. And a few guys got involved in it, but I'll be honest, most of us didn't do
Mike, did you ever commit to the weight room?
it. Only when I was with the Cowboys, but no, not with the Bears.
No, we didn't do all that much on
But
weights.
it saved my career in Dallas. I got in great shape in Dallas. You know, that's a whole different thing.
And if the weight's on your legs, we were told, and I agree with it, that if you want to maintain quickness and speed, you don't build up the muscles in your legs. You've got to be kind of lithe, you might say, especially offensive players, receivers, and backs and stuff that. So some guys do kind of overdo that, I think, in this day and age.
Bob, did you finish your career at the same weight you started your career?
No, actually, the weight was a real problem with the Bear. Halas used to have a real fixation on weights. He would give everybody an assigned weight, and every Thursday he would have a weigh-in of the whole team. And if you're more than 3 pounds over your assigned weight, he would fine you $50 a pound and take it out of your paycheck. So on Wednesday nights, every steam room in the city of Chicago was occupied by Bear players trying to sweat off the weight. So, and they did all kind of shenanigans to try to fix the scales and everything else, but nobody ever was there. They tried getting fish string, invisible fish string, so the guys would stand on the scale and hold on the string, or stuff underneath, you know. But I started out at 249, and as I got older, I was in the steam room myself. I finished up about 255.
For me, it was just the opposite. I only weighed 178, so when I was a rookie and we started weighing in, I had two 2-pound lead weights that I put under in my armpits, because you had a great thing. I wanted to be over 180 so that Mr. Halas wouldn't think I was, you know, too small. So I used those weights for the first year until I made the team, and then I stopped doing it. But it worked.
Tom did that.
Yeah, but my last year I played for the Miami Dolphins, and I had a hard time keeping my weight on because we practice in 80-degree weather every time. So we used to wear these girdles underneath our pads, and I would take and stick a 10-pound plate in the back of my girdle and then get on the scale, and the guy weighed me and goes, "Damn, you're thick for a little guy." And so, you know, I was just trying to, however you could get that weight, you could.
Yeah, Ditka never had a problem. He always used to wear a rubber shirt under his pads whenever he practiced. So he was always wet. He had to lose 10 pounds of practice or whatever.
It worked, huh? Did you ever get fined for weight? Did he fine you guys if you were under or overweight?
Well, he fined people. I never got fined for it, but he fined people. Yeah, well, yeah, you got to make your weight. I mean, we had guys like Herman Lee. I mean, we had guys that couldn't make their weight.
Didn't we have to run the mile the first day that we got there?
In Rensselaer.
In Rensselaer?
We had a mile under 6 minutes.
Or you had to keep running it.
You know, training camp back in the day in Rensselaer, did you guys go to training camp for 6 or 7 weeks at a time?
That's right. Rensselaer, Indiana, the armpit of the nation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We would be there 6 days a week. Yeah. We never got, we trained for, we'd get there the middle of July and not leave camp until after September.
I think if I remember, like we were there almost 3 weeks before we played a preseason game, weren't we?
Yeah.
And we only got one practice on Sunday, but the rest were 2 days, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, again, the first time I ever went to training camp with the Bears, we went 22 straight days of doubles in full pads every practice with conditioning and weightlifting. So all these things that the great George Halas, we were hoping they would, you know, some of that would come off on Mike Ditka.
I learned from the best.
Yeah, you did.
I learned
You know,
from the best.
I wanted to ask you this, Coach, because 250 North Washington, come up here and I'll kick your ass. The Roller Dome, get your mouth shut. All of these quotes by you as a head coach, would George Halas say that?
What?
So during your time as a head coach, us at some of your press conferences in your radio show, you told one guy, hey,
I was nuts. I mean, come on. I was certifiably crazy. You can't go by any. I was out of touch with reality for about 20 years. Now I'm back in touch with reality. I'm a pretty good guy now, but I was a pain in the ass then. I know that. So, I mean, that's life.
So, like he said, what were your initial impressions of Mr. Halas? All three of you, share a story. We'll start with Mike. And you know, he brought you back twice.
Well, the first time I met him, of course, they were 163 West Madison, I guess, or wasn't it? Yeah. So I came in from Pittsburgh on a plane. I got in a cab, and I drove down to 163 West Madison, and I went up and I saw a man named Hallis, and he's the guy who started the National Football League. And you got to realize he was really considered to me, he was an old man. I was 21 years old, and I went into the office, and I mean the conversation was kind of amazing. I was a sixth player picked in the first round, and he said, "I'm going to pay you $12,000 with a $6,000 signing bonus." This is what he told me. And I knew what my dad made working in the mill. I said, "Hey, man, hey, I'll take that, coach." So I had a real good year, made all pro and everything. And I came back next year, and I said, I was looking to get a big contract. And he says, "I'm going to pay you $14,000 this year." I said, "Coach, I made 16 last year." He said, "No, you made 12. I said, "Oh." So I took the contract for 16. I mean, that's just the way it was. And I was happy to have it. And we all had another job. Everybody had another. You had another job. You had another. We all had another job.
What was your other job?
Well, I sold for everybody. Nobody really remembers, but I would sell bullshit if I could. Anything.
How about you, Mr. Hallis?
Mr. Hallis, probably, he gave me an opportunity. In those days, in 1959, there were only 12 teams in the NFL, and there were only 38 players on a squad. And those are the days of the college all-stars used to play the winners of the championship the previous season. And so I was on the college all-star games, and I was drafted by the Redskins. And the 49th player picked. And I joined the Redskins a couple weeks late, and after the second exhibition game, they said, "Goodbye, here's your plane ticket home." Well, I got a call from George Hallis, and he said, we were in North Carolina at that time at an preseason game, and he said, I'd like you to come back and sign with the Bears. And I said, "Well, I don't know what I want to do. I'm enjoying the Marines." I was very disappointed. So he said, "Well, you got to come through Chicago anyhow. You're back home to Minneapolis." He says, "Stop by and let's talk." So he said, "What I'll do is I'd like you to come on the taxi squad this year and sign the contract for next year, and I'll give you a chance to play." Well, he gave me a chance to play, and I made it. So I played 10 years. It was the greatest thrill of my life, winning the championship. So to me, he gave me a great opportunity, and I was fortunate enough to be able to capitalize on it.
Johnny?
Well, I had an unusual situation too. I was at Santa Barbara College, doesn't have a football team anymore, and our coach died. I can't remember if it's my third or fourth year, but he died, and Ed Cody, who used to be a Chicago Bear, came in as coach. They hired him as a coach. He came in as an assistant. He was an assistant when the coach died, and he took over. And in those days, they didn't have scouting systems like they have now. And I wasn't a very big player. And Ed Cody called Papa Bear Hallis and told him, he said, "I got a kid that I think can make it the team." So make a long story short, the Bears were going to pick me up as a free agent because they didn't feel they had to draft me because nobody knew about me. And sure enough, I get a telegram 5 days before the draft from the Green Bay Packers. And they said, we're interested in you. Would you like to play for the Packers and all that kind of stuff? I gave it to Cody, and Cody called Hallis and told him, "Hey, the Packers are interested in Johnny." And so that changed their philosophy, and instead I got drafted way down in the 12th round, but they drafted me instead of trying to sign me as a free agent afterwards. So it's one of those things. If Ed Cody hadn't been named a coach at Santa Barbara College, I might have never played pro football.
you guys all talk about your first experience with George Halas and him telling you how much you're going to make. When did agents enter the picture, and would George Halas be able to accept an agent negotiating on behalf of any of you guys?
No way. He would not talk to agents.
No way. He would not. No, I don't know. I don't think I ever signed a contract as a player, even when I was with the Cowboys, with an agent. I always signed on my own. When I went with Coach Landry, I mean, whatever he said, it was good enough for me. I mean, I never needed an agent. What do you need an agent for? I have an agent now, but nobody wants me. So I mean, the hell. So I got to send him out there, you know. But it's okay.
Do any of you guys remember throughout your lives or career when agents came on the scene and had the guts to sit in front of some of these great owners of the early part of football?
I think they came in with the advent of the American Football League, the AFL, when the teams were bidding against the same players all the time. I know I got a call from an agent, as bad as I was, to switch over to the AFL. So that's,
And you got an offer from the AFL, didn't you? And
Well, Houston drafted me in the AFL. So I mean, when it came time, but they gave me like $8,000 or $12,000. I remember what it was, something like that, and because they thought they were going to get me, and I never went there. I got to keep the $12,000. So actually, my first year with the Bears, I made pretty good money, or my second, whatever year it was, because and I never had any intention of going to the Houston, but it was a good bargaining thing. But you couldn't bargain with Halas. What the hell? You weren't going to win. It didn't matter what you had. You said you could say anything you wanted. I don't do that.
Al Davis contacted me, and I felt the same way. I wanted to be in the NFL, and in those early days, nobody even considered. I mean, the AFL got popular in the mid '60s when guys had two choices, and they started offering big money, to those guys.
Yeah.
How about the innovation of George Halas and his coaching staff? Because you had no real idea that you were going to be a tight end. You thought you were going to be a defensive player in the National Football League.
Well, that was Luke Johnson, really, yeah. Luke, and you can talk about all the old guys. He had a good staff, but he had a very loyal staff. Those guys were all very loyal to him. And, he said, you're going to play tight end. I said, what the hell's a tight end? And Luke Johnson really designed the position. Because you remember, John, I mean, I'd line up, I'd be this close to my offensive tackle. And I would try to get off and release it. The guy would jam me down inside. I couldn't get off the ball. So I told Luke, I said, I can't get off the ball. If I try to go inside, he pushes me down, or he pushes me too far outside. So I split open about 2-3 yards, he told me. Yeah. And we started doing that. And then I had a two-way release. And then I thought I was pretty damn good because I could get off the line of scrimmage. And it was Luke. I mean, Luke really created that. He started flexing us out a little bit. That was good.
the reason why Ditka had to line up so close to the tackles because I was playing tackle and I needed help.
Well, that's not true, Bob. Not true.
Well, you know, how'd you feel about the quality of that offensive line? I mean, you guys...
They were good.
They were good. Remember the Packer game? Jim Cadillo said it was the best performance by an offensive line. You guys ran for 248 yards.
Yeah.
Remember that game?
Yep, I sure do.
You talking about the game we beat the Packers?
Yeah.
In '63? Yeah. That game was, the tone of that game was set when J.C. Caroline on the opening kickoff went down and just slaughtered some, what was that?
Herb Adderley.
Herb Adderley. Herb Adderley was the best defensive back that I ever faced. Him and Night Train Lane were the best.
Two best. Yeah.
How about Ray Nitschke? Ray Nitschke.
Ask Mike. He used to go after him.
There's
He
two
was the
mastodons.
meanest. He was the meanest man I've ever met. He wasn't happy at any time in his life. I mean, really. I got to know him a little bit later after, but he absolutely tried to kill me on the floor. He tried to kill me. Didn't matter where I was. He was going to find me, and he was going to hit me. It was okay, because I found him and hit him too.
What about the stand-up by the middle linebacker? Because you talk about the evolution of the great linebackers, middle linebackers throughout Chicago Bear history, but you talk about Bill George going from a stance up to a middle linebacker position. Was that a component that really allowed that position to grow?
Yeah, there's no question about it. Bill, when Bill George played, he was down in 3 points a lot of times. He played right over the center, and he was quicker than hell. But then he stood up too. But I mean, I'm just saying, we had other linebackers. Fortunato was a pretty good football player too. So who was the other guy?
Larry Morris.
Who?
Larry Morris.
Larry Morris. Can't remember.
And Joe Fortunato.
Yeah, good linebackers.
Larry Morris was the MVP of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
2 interceptions.
When you watch that position, you watch the '63 game, you see him come up out of his stance, and the linebackers were shifting. There are some similarities between football today with the motions out of the backfield in the shifting of the linebacker. So there's those elements that are still in the game today that you guys had a chance to start.
It was the whole element about shifting is basically you're trying to distract. So if you can confuse, I know offensive linemen are hard to confuse.
Right.
If you can confuse them a little bit and make him uncertain about who the hell he's supposed to block, it gives you a big edge because the ball's going to be snapped in hut 1, hut 2, hut 3 period. So he didn't have the time to make up his mind, and that's what people were doing. That's all they were doing. It gives you a little advantage because offensive linemen aren't that smart.
Bob, go ahead.
A low blow.
Hey, let's throw up a picture of the '63 guys getting ready for a practice at Wrigley Field. How close were you guys as a team? Obviously, the team was smaller than it is today. What's everybody thinking here in this? Johnny, you're getting ready for, I guess, practice. You got Ed O'Bradovich in there. You got Doug Atkins.
Johnny
Bob's
just
in there.
got a manicure, obviously. He's looking at his fingernails.
I was just checking my fingernails.
When you look at that picture, does it take you back to Wrigley Field? Does it take you back to that time with your teammates and friends? Tell us what each of you feel about looking at that picture.
I've always wondered what they were looking at.
74 was Kilcullen?
Bob Kilcullen, yeah.
Well, I got most of them.
I don't know what they're looking
This
at.
has got to be pregame. You guys are in full uniforms here. You guys don't dress that well for practice, I assume. That's got to be pregame.
There was probably a band or something marching on the field when we
that
were
was
watching
pregame.
it.
That was pregame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Bob, you think it's when the band was on the field?
Could very well be, yeah. They used to have bands and all that stuff. in those
What
days.
sticks out to me is 81. 81.
That's Doug Atkins.
That was a man.
6'8", 290
He was a
pounds,
man.
something like that. That I think I would really like to know how many sacks he had in his career.
Always fought with Hallis. Always argued with Hallis.
Dick Butkus was on here just a little bit ago, said if he actually worked out and trained, he should have been banned from the NFL because he would have hurt people.
There was
Doug
one.
Atkins.
Oh.
Don't get him mad, right?
Oh. When we scrimmaged the Bears when I was an All-Star, and I had an angle block down on him. So I got my arm in between his legs and I grabbed hold of his leg.
I have a question.
He reached down, he picked me up, really, by the back of my shoulder. If I pulled me up, he go, "You can block me, son, but if you ever hold me, I'm going to break your goddamn neck." I said, "Yes, sir."
I have a question for you four, and I know a lot of the audience, some of the guys we're talking about, people who are young out there, they don't know. But do you know who the first smaller guy in the NFL was thrown out to be a wide receiver? Who was the first guy? There's a question that anybody could answer. I'll give them 2 tickets to
Tommy McDonald.
Who?
Tommy McDonald?
He was second. Played for the Cleveland Browns. Bobby Mitchell.
Yeah.
You remember Bobby Mitchell?
Oh, yeah. Well, Washington? Oh, yeah.
He was the first guy that they put out as a flanker, as
Yeah.
a wide receiver that wasn't 6'2", or
Yeah.
something like that.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, Tommy McDonald, who was a Hall of Famer for the Philadelphia Eagles, they had him in mind when they moved you into different positions. A smaller, shifty guy that could play any of the receiver spots. Do you recollect that?
Say that again. I didn't hear that.
I know that the sound is really difficult for
kinda
everybody
hard,
to hear,
yeah.
so we apologize. So, when they started to move you all over the field,
Yeah.
it was because of how Philadelphia used Tommy McDonald.
Yes, that's accurate.
Does that
That's
resonate with you?
That's accurate. Yes. It just the game became more important about speed, and the guys who had speed are the little guys, and they found that the little guys that could take the punishment, they became great players because they had speed and ability, and you see it every day in the NFL now. The little guys are little guys excite the fans.
That when you see a team picture, Coach, I thought I remember you telling us when I played for you that Rick Caceres was one of the toughest football players that you've ever been.
He was the toughest football player I ever saw.
Why?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. When he used to, he was kind of a prize fighter, and when Marciano retired, they wanted Rick to try to become heavyweight champion. He was a mean son of a gun. I was in a place up on, it wasn't the Cottage. It was a place up on Clark Street one night, and Patty was his girlfriend, Patty Counts, and somebody said something to Patty, and I never seen anything like it. I mean, I was scared he was going to kill the guy. I mean, and he was mean now, and he was the nicest, even-tempered guy in the world. But if he got pissed off, wow. Woo.
Were you with the team yet when we got in a brouhaha with Detroit, over in Detroit, and we saw in the game films afterwards, Rick had walked out on the field
yeah,
and
yeah.
and he decked that
Yeah.
linebacker from Green Bay, from Detroit, and he just walked off the field.
Yeah.
And we didn't know it until after we watched the game film.
Well, they tell a story. They tell a story when he was in Florida, when he was in college, that after the game he went in and they say lock the locker room door to the other team, and he said, "Anyone, one at a time or all of you? Come on." I don't know what happened, but I mean, those are stories they tell. I don't know if they're true.
But
Rick Caceres was the toughest guy. I mean, to me, he was anyway.
How did that translate to the football field? That toughness of how did it translate to what he had to do on the field?
Rick's better days were behind him, but he still was tough. I mean, he was a grinder at the time I got to know him. But when he was early in his career, he was a hell of a running back. I mean, do a lot
Played
of
through
things.
some real bad injuries all the time. He's really a tough guy. Really tough.
So you guys win the 63 championship. You're the toast of the city. How were you received by Mayor Daley and that whole time after the championship?
Well, they had us down at the mayor's office. Remember, we went down there, a bunch of the guys afterwards during the off season. But
I don't think too many guys cared. I think we were on our way to get a beer somewhere.
it wasn't anything like after the Bears won the Super Bowl in '85.
There's your quarterback, Bill Wade.
Mike, why don't you tell them the story about Bukic and Wade?
Rudy Bukic. What's the story?
I don't know if he wants to tell it. I shouldn't have brought it up.
Johnny, you want to tell it?
No. I'll let him talk. What? The time we got in trouble with Papa Bear on Rudy and Bill Wade. Boy, your memory's going, huh?
What'd I do? I know I screwed up somewhere. But at that time, Rudy was a better football player. Yeah. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, Bill was fantastic for us, but Rudy was talented. He could throw the football. And John will tell you, he could throw the football as good as anybody I've ever seen.
After games, did you guys have film evaluation? Did you have that technology back then? Because I always bring up in our film evaluation with Coach Dicker running the projector, it was a humbling experience. Did you guys go through that same thing with George?
We used to break up into units, you know, offensive line, defensive line, all that stuff, and the coach would go over the game films, you know, and somebody would make a mistake. Run that back. Look what you did, you know, so point out to everybody. So it was kind of a humbling experience. Didn't say too much when you made a great block, but when you missed something, it was really pointed out.
All right, before Gale Sayers, Willie Gallimore. How great was he? How hard was 1964 after what happened?
Well, I think that ruined our season. I think we were planning on repeating as champions, and when they got killed, it just kind of took the wind out of our sails. What happened, it was on a Sunday, and we were in Rensselaer, of course, and on Sunday they served no liquor in Indiana, but we were always accepted at the Rensselaer Country Club. So a bunch of us fellas went out to the country club and have a beer or two, and Willie and John Farrington came and brought the pizzas for everybody. So they had a Volkswagen with a sunroof that was open, and we all just stayed there for a little while, watched TV, and had the pizzas, and we left for camp. Well, they took a different road back, and right after that, after we left, and about an hour later, it came news that they had missed a curve driving back on the highway, and both of them had gone through the roof of the Volkswagen and were killed. And that was probably the most difficult thing I've ever had to experience in going to that wake in Rensselaer. And that season, we wore badges on our jerseys that year, and I think that was a constant reminder of their presence and what we missed, and I think it just had a deflating effect on us the whole year.
Johnny, how good of a player was Willie?
How great of a player was Willie Gallimore?
Oh, Willie was. He had speed. Boy, he had that second gear too. He had a great second gear. He wasn't quite as quick right out of the gate as like a Sayers, you know, but he had that second gear. If he got open, nobody was even going to come close to him. You know, I've had I played with Sayers, and I covered Peyton, and I've covered a lot of, I remember Jimmy Brown, all these great running backs. And I like to say the best way to explain the greatest backs of all time, you try and figure out who it is. And the best way I could say is that if I wanted any running back for a season, I'll take Walter Payton, the greatest ever. If I want a player for one play, I'll take Gale Sayers for one play, Gale Sayers. And you can talk about Jimmy Brown and talk about O.J. and talk about a lot of these great players, but I think it's one thing that Chicago Bears are noted for a lot of great players, especially on defense, but they had some pretty darn good offensive players, right? And there's one right over there, yeah.
That's pretty good, John.
Was a guy like Willie Gallimore, you know, one thing about Walter Payton, you know, we had the designated play call. It would make an impact in the defense for 2 or 3 yards and let Walter display his greatness. A guy like Willie Gallimore, was your offense, Bob, was it designed to that specific, or did you have a freedom of choice?
Well, we ran the plays that were called. I don't think Willie had an inordinate number of plays called like they would for Walter Payton or somebody like that. But he was the key to his running style was he had a very long stride, and he's, you know, in a way, Gale Sayers was that way too, and they'd be able to change directions in very, very quickly.
Yeah, Gale was more quicker cutting and open field than Willie was. But Gallimore, boy, I never saw anybody so fast once he got through the line of scrimmage, you know.
All right, we got some fan questions we're going to bring out here in a second. You guys stayed in Chicago after your playing careers and started your second careers. Johnny, you became a famous TV sportscaster here in town. Did you love that part of your life, being a sportscaster?
Oh yeah, it's great fun, especially being able to cover the sport that you played, you know, and kind of went through generations of Bears. That's one of the things here. When I came here, I had a bigger problem of remembering faces and names because I had every decade to worry about because I either played with them or covered them until the last 20 years, you know. But it's been a good life.
What was it like interviewing Mike after games?
Oh, no, we used to. We'd either go to.
Don't go there.
We did a lot of those Sunday night shows when I was a little under the weather.
Sometimes on the Bears Extra, we used to have fun.
I mean, they were famous. Those interviews were legendary sometimes, right?
Well, they were better when we won than when we lost. I know that.
But he was a fair journalist, right?
No, he was. No, he was great. He was great. He was great. He was a bright, shining light in Chicago at that time.
Was it hard to separate, though, the friendship you guys forged as being players together, then all of a sudden you're on a kind of a different professional stage than a professional playing field?
Well, I never looked at it that way. I'm sorry, but I never looked at it that way. I mean, John was my friend, and he had a job, and he did his job, and I did my job, and sometimes it didn't work.
But you know what? I know us as players that we would watch that show just hoping that you wouldn't say anything mean about us. And if we got through the Johnny Moore show without Coach Ditka saying, then okay, you might get through the film session the next day.
I never said the offensive line stunk. No, we had no, it was fun. I had a lot of fun doing that show with John. I really did. And I tell you what, I bet you that was one of the best received shows in Chicago television.
No, we had the ratings were astronomical, and people they loved Mike Ditka, they loved the Bears, and he's entertaining, as we know.
Well, it was a great time. It was a great period of time. Did you enjoy being called a commentator on the network for games?
Yeah, that was doing network games was fun. I was always happy if I got to do a Bear game. You know, when you work for CBS Network and I'm in Chicago, I did my local sportscasting, and then on the weekends I would go do games, and I would always want to do Bear games, but I didn't always get the Bear games. Sometimes the Bears were playing here, and I'm doing a game Detroit Lions against Minnesota, and have to fly back and do Bears Extra and stuff when I hadn't even seen the Bear game. You know, it could be a hassle. So, but that's the nature of the beast, right?
All right, some fan questions. This is from Amanda in Schaumburg. What was it like playing at Wrigley Field?
I never ran into the goalpost. Did you? Did you ever run into the goalpost?
No, I'm sure the receivers did, though. The goalposts were on the goal line in those days, and neither of the end zones was actually 10 yards deep. One ended up at the wall, and the north end zone was just short of 10 yards. And they ran into the brick wall, the left field wall.
Did that affect your goal line offense or even the type of pass plays you guys would run from the 5-yard line in?
You ever go in the dugout on the first base side? I think I went in there one time, accidentally slid in there after catching a pass. You know what? It was close, but it was great. I mean, I thought it was great. The fans were right on top of you. They were right on top of you. You know, I thought it was a great place to play football. I really did.
Was it half the year infield for you, and then did they go to all grass, or was it infield all year round?
Well, they sodded the infield after You know, when you played your first couple games, it was dirt, but they sodded it. Then it was terrible.
We never had, because the Cubs played
Yeah.
until late September, we always had to play on the road the first
Exactly.
2 or 3 games.
But that it was a great field. They sodded it, and it never came up when we played. You know,
And then Brandon from Oak Park. What was the best lesson you all learned from Coach Alice?
Bob, you're laughing.
don't swear.
Be on time, pay attention, and play like hell.
Best lesson, to watch your pennies. When he signed me, he said, Johnny, we like you, we want you to play for us and everything. We're going to give you our $6,000. And that was the NFL minimum. So I had a pretty good year, and I thought I was going to get a raise. He offered me $7,000 the next year. You know, that was Papa Bear George Alice. He told me to watch my pennies, and that's what I do.
Was anybody on making money? Was it, well, like, who was the guy that walked in the locker room and said, wow, this guy's making some coin, or this guy's...
Nobody knew what everybody was making.
Actually,
Everybody kept it to themselves.
It really happened with Sayers and Butkus, right? That's when
Yeah.
the big money started,
Yeah,
when
yeah,
they
yeah.
came in.
When they came in 2 years after you win a championship, did you guys think, wow, we're going to win another one?
We were a pretty good team in '65, and we didn't win it. We got beat out by Baltimore, I believe. But
On a controversial call, remember that Ray Berry?
yeah, yeah. But it's we were a good team in '65, no question about it. But didn't win it.
We had Sayers and we had Rudy Bukic was quarterback.
Pardon?
I said Rudy Bukic was quarterback and
Right.
Sayers was the running back. So
Yep.
I think that's the first time the Bears have ever led the league in offense for the year, for the season.
And then last question from Ryan in Wrigleyville. Do you guys like the direction of the way the league is going here in 2019?
The league?
Yeah. Sport.
With
Well,
social
Are you
media.
kidding me? They're making a lot of money. Are you kidding me? Hell, play sports today, you make a lot of money. I mean, these guys should never have to work a day in their life. They should be set for life if they take care of it. And that's great. I'm glad to see that. I'm glad to see them making that kind of money because it's a tough game. You get hurt and you can be screwed up for your whole life. But no, I just hope they appreciate what they got because it's not going to be there forever. But while you got it, put it away, save it, and when you're done playing, you won't have to work anymore.
What I don't like is all the instant replay. I mean, the timeouts for the referees, reviewing the referees' calls. Now they're getting more calls for controversial pass interference and all that type of stuff. It's just delaying the game, and it just makes it bad for the fans to sit, particularly at the games, to sit on their hands while they don't know what's going on.
Johnny?
I forgot the question.
State of the league right now. Are you excited where the NFL
I got
is
hit
going?
in the head a couple of times. What was the question?
He was asking Johnny if you're excited the direction the league is going. The different aspects, either end zone celebrations, the whole social media involvement, the replays by officials, all those elements.
I think it's society changes, every generation changes, and so the way it's going, it's all right with me. I think it's fine. Guys want to celebrate in the end zone and whatever. It's just that you almost have to accept what's changing. Just look at this is my own opinion. Everybody's got computers now. Everybody's got iPhones now. And all this hacking that's going on, all these things that are happening. Baltimore, the city of Baltimore, got hacked. They're hacked and they have to pay money to get unhacked. It's like, I'm going to give you an example. You remember when auto racing was they were going faster and faster at the Indianapolis 500, faster. Pretty soon they started having a lot of accidents when I was covering it because they were getting too fast. So what did they do? They put limits on the horsepower. And so they've really cut down. They knew man couldn't control it anymore. Man could not control the speed, so they cut back on it. Now, what's happening with computers and iPhones and all this stuff, we can't control it anymore. It's getting out of hand. And what is it going to be like? I mean, you know, everybody that has computers, you know what's going on. And I just wonder how it's all going to end up. I don't know, it just kind of scares me.
Interesting time indeed. All right, we're out of time. The 63 championship team, Mike Ditka, Bob Wataska, Johnny Morris. Thank you, everybody. Thank you guys very much.